there it is. What's up, guys?
Hello. How's it going?
Just we need to figure out a fade from that video to this.
I know.
Otherwise, I'm going to keep scaring myself every time.
I know. They need to have like a fade or something like that, don't they? I think they should.
Or we could do an explosion. Just complete opposite.
That's a good idea.
Actually, I like that. Everybody like bounces around the screen and like falls into place.
That would be very cool.
And here we go.
All right, I'm sorry, guys. I'm going to probably have a little fun with these sound effects that they allow us to use now. So bear with me. So what's going on, fellas?
Not much, man. Just trying to spread the love without getting hurt, right?
Yeah. Frank, you weren't feeling well last week, man. You doing better?
Yes. Yeah, you would not have wanted to see me or hear me last week. I would have been, yeah, it wasn't good, man. It was bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know what's funny is so Nick and I were doing an event in Gainesville, so we had to do our part of the show from the hotel, and so we were connected to wireless internet, of course, and we kept thinking that Taylor, our guest, which by the way, you guys should definitely go back and watch that episode if you didn't see it, because a lot of really cool stuff on there. We kept thinking that she was freezing up. And then I started getting texts from people like, no, it's you guys that are freezing up. She's fine. It's you guys that keep freezing up. So gotta love technology, right?
What are you going to do?
Yeah. Yep. Well, hey, everybody that's out there watching live right now, we appreciate you guys. Feel free to drop a message. Let us know who's checking in, who's with us tonight. We got a great guest. We got an amazing topic. It was funny before we got started. We were talking about how excited I was, and he was like, "Well, that's good. I'm glad somebody is, because normally when you start talking about legal stuff, everybody falls asleep." But I'm telling you right now, if you're a business owner and you're watching right now, do not fall asleep, because it's going to be a lot of, I think, powerful information to help you out. And if nothing else, you can check the boxes that you're already doing right. And then the things that you need to continue to keep working on, we'll be able to go through those tonight. So again, if you're out there watching, please feel free to drop a comment. Let us know who's there. And we just appreciate y'all being here. And Frank, anything else you want to go into before we get out of here?
Yeah, kind of.
I already know what it's going to be. Go ahead. Let's do it.
Baseball.
Hold on. Okay. And then
baseball.
And then, all right, enough. No, I'm so excited too, man.
Oh my gosh, I was so nervous. I'm like, we finally have an owner wanting to spend money. He goes out and he signs like a big money arm. He's making all these moves, and then they're just like, you know what? Let's just shut baseball down. It's such a Mets thing to have happen too. Gotta love it. Well, we'll see what happens, man. We'll see what happens. I know you know Jay Holla. He messaged me the other day, and he's like, hey, you're a Boston fan, right? I'm like, yep. He's like, okay, I just wanted to make sure who to rag on when Houston starts playing. And I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't know. We'll see what happens, though. I got the same text messages. Did you really? Yeah, except he was like, I'm gonna tell you every time the Astros beat the Mets, and I was like, okay. That's terrible, man.
Is Houston good this year? Explain for non-baseball folk.
They've been pretty consistently good for probably like 5 or 6-ish years now. Yeah. So I would think that they'll, I mean, there's always a couple of teams you don't expect to be good that are bad, or a couple of teams that you expect to be good that end up being bad, vice versa, right? So I mean, you never know, but I would say that they're not on the list of teams that will end up not looking good.
Oh wow!
Well, they were good in the trash can era, but other than that,
that.
Thank you.
My guy.
I'll be here all night.
I'll be here.
You know what? We should rename this. We should practically rename this podcast "Wedding Business Growth and Sports."
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if it has the same ring to it. Nick, what about you, man? What's your excitement this week, brother?
My excitement this week, concert on Friday. Stoked for it. One of my favorite bands is coming to town, a little reggae band. So I'm excited.
What band?
What's that?
What band?
Ayaterra. They're like a smaller band out of California. So
okay,
kind of rare for them to come to Jacksonville, Florida. So I was stoked on it when I saw that they were coming. So
I was stoked to find out that WWE was here last night.
What?
But I didn't find out about it until last night.
That's nuts.
Monday Night Raw.
Where were they? At the arena?
The arena, yeah.
Wow.
Oh well. Hey, and Scott Hall passed away, right? That's terrible. Terrible
That's
news to
horrible.
hear that, man. Goodness.
I mean, one of the I know. Like one of the like clearest. I mean, I'm a huge wrestling fan, so it is what it is. But one of like the clearest moments that I ever remember watching a wrestling match was the Shawn Michaels Razor Ramon first ever ladder match.
Yep.
You know, and it was awesome. So
that's what set it all off, man. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I mean, I think between that and I will forever say that him and Kevin Nash going over to WCW and doing the whole NWO thing was, to me, the greatest thing that ever happened in wrestling.
Well, if you don't get NWO, then you don't get a bad guy Hogan.
Yep.
You don't get DX. You don't get Stone Cold. You don't get. I mean, all that stuff happened because of them dipping out. Oh man, the tweet though, like yesterday morning before they took him off life support, the Kevin Nash tweeted out that like the family would be pulling him off life support and like, you know, I love you more than I'll ever love any human being in my whole entire life, and like just this really like, you know, sentimental thing. And then today X-Pac's been like going all day long about it. It's pretty, you can tell it's shook the core of the wrestling
I mean,
world.
it would be no different than something happened to one of us. You know what I mean? Like when you just spend so much time with people, man, they're like family to you. You know, it's just terrible. But unfortunately, it's life. It's going to happen to all of us at some point. So, you know, just you have to remember the great years of him being around and being a part of something we love to watch. So,
yeah, 100%.
All right. Well, moving on from the somber stuff. I thought I had something to say and I forgot.
I was like waiting.
We were waiting.
I know, right?
You're frozen.
You're like, oh my God, we're waiting with bated breath, and I completely failed you guys, and I apologize. All right, so we'll go to one other thing I want to bring up, and then we're gonna move into our guest because this just needs to be about this topic tonight. But just want to say that I was very excited to be a part of an event that Nick and I did last week called the Inspiring Women Leaders Conference. This was the 5th annual one, and Nick and I did the production for that. And I was actually able to even give a presentation at that. And it was good. I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. Had a lot of laughs, a lot of connecting with some cool people. So it was a lot of fun.
I mean, that's an awesome opportunity too, you know?
Yep.
Because I think once you get into the like event production side of it like that, you know, you don't want to, right? You don't want to just do a bunch of like, you know, like car manufacturing companies, right? You want to do different things all the time and something that's going to like challenge you. And I'm sure you all had a ton of takeaways from it, from everyone who spoke there. So that's always really fun.
Super fun.
Yeah, it's kind of cool to work production at an event because it's like being able to go to the event for free. You know what I mean? Like you get, like you said, you get all the takeaways, you get all the information, and you know, you just have to be there working. And I was I was fortunate enough to give a presentation, and we were at the University of Florida, so I even broke out my old University of Florida Gator Jordans when I was on stage and had fun with it.
So
nice.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, let's move on. Let's go. Here we go. All right, guys. So thank you again for being on with us today, everybody. Or if you're listening to the replay, we appreciate your support to Wedding Business Growth. As always, we remind you, if you're watching right now, right above us, scrolling up here, you can join our text club where we will let you know when new shows are going to be live or anything else that's going on in the Wedding Business Growth community. We can connect with you. We won't bug you to death. Hopefully those of you that get our text can confirm that we keep it really simple, but we'd love for you to be a part of that. So just join the club by texting your name to the number scrolling across the top of the screen. All right, here we go. So Rob Schenk is a trial attorney representing wedding and event professionals since 2012. Rob's focus has been on helping wedding pros operate legally and stay out of trouble, which we all want to do, right? In 2016, he launched wedforms.com, and that's FORMZ, wedforms.com, a database of downloadable contract templates for wedding and event businesses. In 2020, Rob started the Wedding Industry Law YouTube channel and podcast, which I am a faithful viewer and listener to, by the way. I love that channel. Rob's expertise has been featured in Time, Huffington Post Weddings, Yahoo News, Slate Magazine, The Knot, Petapixel, Above the Law, and Mobile Beat. So without further ado, please help us welcome our guest, Mr. Rob Schenk. Hey, Rob, how are you, bud?
Hey, everybody. What's going on?
Nice effect. I like it.
There you go.
Thanks for
Yeah.
coming.
David, you got to watch out because I can, hang on one second. Let's see.
Uh-oh. Ooh,
I've got
bringing the heat.
My own bucket of sound effects I can bring in too.
I love it. Feel free at any time we love being distracted. So between me and Frank being entertainers and just having to be distracted at a drop of a hat, and Nick being a videographer and people get in the way of his camera and all that stuff, we're so used to just rolling with whatever happens.
Right. With the pesky guest messing things up. Yes.
Oh, not a problem. So how things been for you, Rob? Are you feeling good about this year? Is things kind of starting to pick back up again in your world?
Yes, rocking and rolling. It seems that I mean, everybody's not back exactly on track, but it seems like everything is picking up to pretty good levels, at least in my anecdotal experience with my clients that I work with. So it's everybody's calendar seems to be filling up. So that's great.
So I'm curious, what attracted you to the wedding and event business? Did you do something in the industry beforehand, or what kind of brought you from practicing law and then being involved in this industry?
My background when I first graduated was in kind of business law, business litigation. So like companies like getting mad at each other, suing each other for breach of contract, that kind of stuff. So that's kind of how I cut my teeth, how I got into the business side of the law, as it were. And then at that time, I was dating a wedding photographer in the Atlanta area. So one day I think I said something like, "Hey, let me see what you got. What are you showing your clients?" And with my background, I was like, okay, maybe you should change this or change this, but I didn't really understand the industry at the time. I only understood the law. So over the course of several years, I got to know a lot of the photographers. Then that blossomed into venues, DJs, videographers, the whole thing. And I kind of learned, obviously the more of the particulars of the law, but also the parlance, like how you guys talk to each other, why it's important, X, Y, Z happens, these type of things. So the rep kind of grew. And, here we are today, I guess, I don't know, over 10 years later. Oh,
very nice. I'm moving us all around. There we go. That's what I was looking for. That's the
okay.
I was looking for right there.
I'm really glad that when you went to the wide, I'd clean everything off. I was like, okay, wait a minute. We're supposed to tight shot. I got to make sure there's nothing like, I don't have like something going on over here. So we're okay.
No, you're good. You're good. Everything looks good. I think Frank was trying to pick out the different GI Joe and different things behind you earlier before we got started this morning. This evening, excuse me.
Right. Well, no, that I think so. Right above me is this was all I cared about when I was about 8 or 9 years old. That is the issue of GI Joe where Snake Eyes and Storm Shadow stormed the Cobra Island to seek revenge on, I believe it was Zartan, for killing the Hardmaster. Just so
that
you
is
know.
No, that's awesome. I was like the funeral for a friend, the Doomsday like series for Superman, into like the funeral for a friend. Like, yeah, that was my GI Joe.
That's right. That's all good things. Loving the comic books.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, I think we need to just dive right into this because we have quite a few topics that I think are going to be very important to pretty much anybody watching and hopefully listening to the replay. So I say let's just dive right into this. Nick, you want to kick us off, man?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the first thing that I wanted to talk about, because I know that I've gotten burned with this myself, maybe we could talk a little bit about non-refundable deposits. I know that during COVID, we had a lot of issues with that. Me, myself, it was tough. I had to give everything back because my contract wasn't correct. So, maybe we could talk a little bit about, non-refundable deposits. Are they enforceable? What is the legal, structure behind that?
Great question. So, so typically when you're dealing with situations in which the event is canceled by the client for reasons that are within the client's control, that's going to be a breach of contract. You've promised to go and DJ or video a wedding. They've promised to be at that wedding and pay you money for that job. Those are promises, and promises, in exchange for money or exchange for services constitute a contract. So when there's a breach of contract, there's going to be damages. And the damages that you would get, so to speak, in a normal breach of contract action would be kind of, you would want to be placed in the position that you would have been in had the bargain gone forward, as if the wedding had gone forward. And there's a lot of, it's a pain in the butt to have to sue somebody for breach of contract. So I'll get to a point, I promise. So the idea here is with the non-refundable deposit is that functions as an agreement between you and the client to say, look, if you cancel this for reasons within your control, like you just don't love this guy anymore, you want to have a different date and I'm not available, these type of things, then what we're going to do is I'm not going to sue you for breach of contract. I am going to retain X amount of money. So, and you're going to agree to that's a reasonable amount. And in reality, that is what's called a liquidated damages clause. It's liquidated in the meaning that it's a finite amount of money, damages being the word for money in law. So our non-refundable deposits, our liquidated damages clauses in contracts in the wedding industry enforceable. They 100% are. There's no question. The curveball that all of us got thrown was COVID, in the sense that the typical non-refundable deposit, the liquidated damages clause in your contracts typically do not deal with cancellations for reasons beyond the control of the parties. That's a whole different bag of worms. So we could talk about that, but in terms of like, is that enforceable? What can we do? What you do is you just it's important that you lay out why the money is not going back. Right. And we can talk about that, but you tell them, hey, listen, this is why it's important that I hold on to it. And then you make sure the client agrees that's reasonable in that circumstance. And you lay out when and why it doesn't go back, and you should be okay. That's going to be enforceable in most instances.
Enforceable in most instances. So in terms of the amount per the deposit, so maybe another question we can kind of dive into just real quick is we see this deposit versus retainer jargon, right?
Yep.
What do you think in terms of the appropriate terminology to be using? Is it technically a deposit or a retainer? What's the difference? Maybe you could explain that for our audience.
For all intents and purposes, in my experience, and I mean, I haven't read every single case in the country, but in my experience, the term deposit or the term retainer, it's irrelevant. The important thing is what I mentioned, that you describe what is non-refundable, what is not going back, and under what circumstances. That's the more important thing than what it's called. The issue with the word retainer or the word deposit is a lot of baggage that goes along with it. So in most instances, and in most people's lives, when you see the word deposit, it's usually in the form of some type of lease, or it's in some type of situation where the point of it is that you get it back if something doesn't happen. So even though that's not the case in a wedding industry law contract, or at least it shouldn't be, people have that in their minds, and perhaps a judge might have it in their mind. The same thing with retainer. A retainer is typically a term of art as it pertains to attorneys. And in most states, a retainer has to be earned. And to the extent that it's not earned, it has to go back. So again, that could be a head scratcher for a judge. So I guess at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you call it. What's more important is what comes after it. However, there are certain words that have baggage, and you might want to try something else. So like in my contracts, I don't use those. I don't use the words. I try to tiptoe around the word deposit and the word retainer. So I've used installments in my contracts because this is something that people can think about, is that it doesn't have to just be the first payment that's non-refundable. So if you take 3 payments, if you take 4 payments, if you take 2 payments, each of those payments can be non-refundable in and of themselves and be essentially included in that liquidated damages clause in the non-refundable deposit portion of the contract, if that makes sense. So that's kind of my short answer to, well, should we call it a deposit? Should we call it a retainer? Doesn't matter. Most part.
When you refer to what goes after it, is it something where, you're spelling out this is a non-refundable amount of money, and for this money, the company will be providing X service in exchange for this money, in essence? Does that kind of
Yes and no. So
Okay.
the idea is that, again, the client's canceling the event. So there's going to be some amount that you're not going to get. You're not going to get full benefit of the bargain, right? So, but in the client's mind, you have a day off now and you should be celebrating that. But it's not. I got a mortgage to make. So what comes behind it is going to be, in part, these are the reasons why it's non-refundable. So for example,
Gotcha.
depending on what industries you're in. So this is variable to if you're a DJ versus whatever. But if we're all DJs talking now, then let's be a DJ. So it might be, I am creating set lists behind the scenes you don't know about. I'm retaining special equipment. Maybe I need a special truss for your for your event in this venue because the lighting requirements are different. I am perhaps acquiring licenses for songs because you have special requests and I got to get a special license for them or whatever the case is. It could be that I have to get a couple dudes secondary to help me load in. I mean, got to retain some roadies, for example. Mm-hmm. So you're doing things in the background that money represents other than reserving the date. So that's what the client thinks. Like, this money is just to reserve the date. Now that I don't need the date anymore, I want the money back. No, I am doing things that you don't see that is earning that money. And therefore it's a reasonable amount. So there's a whole lot more, but as long as you're kind of in that ballpark, then you should be okay. You should be okay.
Yeah. I love this topic a lot, man, because you're right, Nick. Nick, you're absolutely right. That's been a conversation for many, many years, especially in our industry. Do we use retainer? Do we use deposit? So it's nice to hear that part of it is not really what we should be thinking about, but like you said, Rob, the second half of that. So I love that.
Right. Yeah. And kind of to go specific to what we've all been dealing with over the last couple of years, how would all of this be different over what we've all dealt with through this pandemic, where in different areas of the country for different periods of times, events were actually just unable to have, to occur? How did that change? How would that, one, change the ability for those items to be non-refundable? And two, is there something that people can do to prepare for if that were to happen again in the future?
Great question. So I recommend, and there's more than one way to skin a cat, but my recommendation is based on the principle that you typically, the liquidated damages is for cancellation for reasons within the party's control. So set that aside. Now let's talk about COVID. Let's talk about hurricanes. Let's talk about wildfires, these type of things that are hopefully beyond the control of the parties. Typically, this is going to be handled in the force majeure clause of the contract. So the force majeure clause typically is just a clause that says, I'm not going to sue you for breach of contract for not showing up in the middle of a hurricane, or you being in the middle of a venue that's burning down to the ground, being like, hey, I'm here ready to DJ. I got my marshmallows. Why aren't you here? It's just a clause that says I'm not going to sue you if I cannot complete my end of the bargain for something that's beyond my control. Now, the issue with COVID is, when does COVID, or when does the wildfire, when does the hurricane, when should we consider that a triggering event that would prevent us from going forward? So if you remember, there were some people like, I'm going to put my hazmat suit on and I'm going to go to this thing. And I don't care if you went from 100 or 1,000 person wedding to a 10 person wedding, I'm going to DJ at the show. So what I recommend is that not only do you specify COVID-19, but you have to specify if you can, an objective third-party triggering mechanism. So for example, if the CDC or the local city, state, federal government issues an order, a law, whatever it is, that says X, then the show won't go on, right? If you can take it out of the subjective opinions of the client or the professional, the better. So for example, I've seen the contracts where it was like, if within 90 days of the event, okay, the city government issues a proclamation that requires PPE, that requires 6-foot distancing, that you can't eat, then we're going to call that a force majeure event, and it's going to trigger the force majeure clause. So that's kind of an example of it's going to be helpful for you to objectively lay these things out. So that's just the first part of it. The next part of it is to prevent the client from just being like, I'm out of here. So I recommend to everybody, but again, you got to think about what's best for your specific business. But I recommend that everybody obligate the parties to reschedule in the force majeure clause, because that's not something that's necessarily required, but you can require it in the contract. Say, look, to the extent that the force majeure clause was triggered by whatever event, whether it was a hurricane or COVID or whatever, we're going to agree that within the next year, we're going to reschedule. So that way you at least retain, or at least theoretically, you're going to get 100% of the contract value out of it, right? So that's important to do. And that way you are, by obligating the party to reschedule, you're going to prevent them from just saying like, we're just going to elope now. Well, okay, you're going to elope, but I'm keeping the money now, right? So anyway, so there's there's an added level of nuance in order to keep money if the event's canceled for reasons not in the control of the parties.
That's interesting, right? But just because I think everyone was panicking, right? And if something like this were to ever happen again, everyone would panic all over again. And I think there's been a lot of, textbook lawyers out there, right? Just people who picked up a book that they found that says learn law in 10 minutes, right? That then kind of came behind and gave everybody a whole bunch of advice. So I just wanted to ask it because I think it's appropriate for us to hear it directly from somebody who does this, for a living every day.
But yes, I appreciate that. But just so you recognize that, like, there are trial judges that are reading that same book because they don't know. Like, it's not like we all have had force majeure memorized since law school, and that's the problem. So I've had super weird results, like not me personally, but my clients come to me like, Rob, like, from not my contract, but their previous contract saying, look, like, this is what happened. And I'm like, man, I cannot believe that the judge found that way. But it's just, sometimes if you don't spell it out for a trial judge, then you end up losing. But anyway, yeah. So there's been a lot of learning from everybody in the legal industry, from the attorneys to the judges.
So kind of keeping along that, but turning a little bit, right? Everybody knows that in the wedding industry, it's super important word of mouth, right? And you're building your reputation as a business, as you DJ this wedding and you go to this event and you meet these vendors and you go to these venues, and you're just building up this rapport within the industry, and you're kind of setting your business, and you're letting people know this is what we do and this is how we provide what we provide. And so you're working really hard in this industry to make sure that your name above all else, right, stands on its own 2 feet. But bad reviews specifically, can happen to anybody at any time. And those bad reviews, one bad review is going to raise above 50 good ones. We know that people will see that one thing and they'll want to know what happened here, or they might, shoot you an email, or maybe you're never going to hear from them because they see this one thing that sets off a red flag for them. So let us know a little bit, when is it that a bad review actually turns into defamation of your business?
Defamation by definition is a false statement that lowers the reputation of a business in their community. So the primary word there is false. So it's perfectly legal to disparage anybody like this. I went to, DJ, I don't know, Tanner, and he was so slow that, I thought he might've been dead. Right. Like, that's okay. Like, I mean, that was my, that was my perception of what happened. That's my opinion about what happened. Although opinions aren't necessarily protected. We can see that is a objectively, it can be objectively true or false, and it's not false. The guy was so slow, or it's a joke or whatever. Anyway, now if I say DJ Tanner stole $10 out of my wallet while I wasn't looking, and that's objectively false, and that's defamation, right? So the problem, not that it's a problem. There's a couple of things that make defamation cases difficult in this scenario with Google, with Yelp, all that kind of stuff. Is that number one, defamation is very fact specific. Like it typically has to be really bad for the judicial system to really work its magic. So by way of example, I had an attorney on from Texas on my podcast, and he got an over $1 million verdict on a defamation case for a wedding photographer in Texas. But the couple lied. They went on the news and lied. They tried to get people to go and give bad reviews to this wedding photography under false pretenses. And they did all these type of things, and there were actual provable damages in the case. And so that was a meritorious case. But typically when I get calls like, can I sue this clown? It's like, this is super marginal. Like, it's like, it rides the line. Like this person can say that you're not timely with your communications, and timely to them might be, you didn't call me in 2 hours. Timely to you might be 24 hours. Right. So it's the first problem is that it's extremely fact specific. It's very difficult. Okay. And typically you have to have the whole deck stacked against the person in order to be successful. The second thing is that you can't, this is debated. This is reasonable. People can disagree on this, but in normal defamation law, if you come up to me and go, hey, I heard that DJ Tanner stole $5 from this other person. I'm like, really? That's crazy. And then I go and say that same thing. I'm liable, even though I'm not the originator of the defamation of the slanderous accusation. But there's a law that basically says that if you fall under some type of category of web provider, i.e. Google, Yelp, not these type of public forums, for lack of a better word, you're immune from defamation claims. So you can't sue the poster and Google for defamation. You can only sue the person that did the bad review. So there are two things that make it difficult to bring one of those claims. So I always say that there's a really great wedding business professional. He's like a coach. His name is Alan Berg. Mm-hmm. I really recommend. I don't know if y'all have had him on the show. Are you?
We've been trying to get him on. I'm hoping to make it work soon. Yep.
Yeah, it's probably hard. It's like trying to get like David Hasselhoff on the show.
I know, right?
But anyway, like I follow his advice. It's just like, man, the only thing you're going to be able to do is just get more of your friends to give you reviews, respond fairly to the bad review. Because it happened to me with my firm. Like somebody it was like a Facebook message, and I don't check Facebook. As y'all might already have gathered, I'm not really great with social media. So so they gave me 1 star because I didn't respond to a Facebook message in time. But what can you do?
That's rough. Yep.
Let me ask a follow-up question real quick to that. So you were talking about like what's timely to me versus what's timely to the client. If I and I don't know that somebody would want to do this, right? But I've heard of people that have done things like this where they put those kind of expectations within the contract, right? Saying like, I will communicate with you via these methods. I will get back to you within this period of time. If somebody then went online and stated, hey, this person didn't get back to me within these timeframes, and in the contract you detailed it, and you can prove that you did get back within those timeframes, would that be a time where like you were able to make it clear up front and you did meet those requirements, or how does that work? Is that still like that on the line thing?
No, so in that scenario, if they're saying X and it's really not X, then you might have a claim if that lowers your reputation in the community. So like if that's if in that same hypothetical, if that actually did damage them and they can prove the damages, meaning like ever since I got that bad review, my sales have dropped, or I usually get 20 leads a day. Now I'm getting 3 leads a day. and you link up the damages, then yeah, that could definitely be something that you could do. Then you got to collect. That's the other thing too. So one of the main reasons why you see billboards only of attorneys that do car wreck stuff is because behind the person that you're suing is an insurance company that's going to pay the verdict, right? That's money. Like there's every state has a law like insurance company, pay that man his monies. But when you sue somebody for defamation, there might not be an insurance policy behind it. There probably isn't one, depending on where they did it. Some like homeowners insurance policies might cover you. I don't know. But if there's not, and you get $1 million verdict against John Doe, DJ Tanner, who's got, $12 in his bank account and driving around in a 96 Hyundai, all you have is a piece of paper that says that DJ Tanner owes you $1 million. And good luck.
Right. That's a great. People, Chris Dis joining us, said it was a wrong link to the stream. Sorry about that. Let me know. Just send me a private message if you don't mind. Just let me know where that went to, Chris, so we can make sure that doesn't happen again. Also, shout out to Tyler Wallace out there watching us tonight. Thank you, man. Thank you for checking in with us.
T-Dub in the house.
Yes, that's your boy right there. Chris says you can't get blood out of a stone. Exactly.
That is the metaphor that I use. That and turnip. You can't squeeze blood out of a turnip.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Has anybody noticed that I've got the live stream here?
That's so cool.
What does that affect? It's named after somebody, but it's like the thing within the thing within the thing within the thing within the thing.
Like that, the mirror effect, right?
Yeah.
That's cool. I knew there was something back there, but I couldn't quite make out what it was. But now that you mention it, I can make it out a lot better now. Absolutely. All right. So here's something that I think this might be the cream of the crop of the information tonight, which is there has to be some contract clauses that most of us in the wedding industry just don't know we should have, or we didn't seek out legal help. We just got with one of our friends that were doing it before us and said, hey, let me get a copy of your contract or something like that. So share, if you can, maybe just some clauses that we as wedding professionals need to make sure we have in our contracts, and maybe we don't.
Right. I think that one of the main things and this is like in the category of the most overlooked things. We've already talked about deposits, stuff like that. So that's the critical number one. That's the first thing you should go after in terms of getting right with your contractors, the money part. But let's talk about things that are overlooked. I think the most overlooked is the model release and authority to photograph the event. So if you're a DJ, just because you're DJing the event doesn't give you the right to take the photos from the professional photographer at the event and use them on your own website. Even if the clients agreed that you could do that, you typically aren't going to have the right to do that because you don't have the license to do that. Most clients don't get the copyright of the images from the professional photographer. They only get a license for private use. So even if the client says, yeah, you can use, the photographer stuff, I don't care about it. You might be hurting on that aspect. Or if you take your own photos, unless your contract allows you to, typically you are not going to be able to utilize the likeness, meaning literally the individual that appears in the image, without their permission. That's the release part of it. So you want to be able to get authorization from the client that you can take your own pictures at the event, that it's not going to conflict with any obligation that they have with the primary photographer, and that you'll be able to use those images and be the copyright owner of those images, and you're going to use them for XYZ purposes. And there's a whole bunch of different things you can talk about, but that's the main point, that just because you're there doesn't mean that you can photograph stuff. You need to get permission to photograph. You need to get permission to use their likeness, and you need to make sure the scope of that is laid out pretty clearly. So that's kind of the first thing. Second thing is, I think it's important that you have what's called a limited liability clause in your contract. So there is an idea where If I'm buying, if you're buying my Ford F-150, my 2008 Ford F-150, and then I don't show up and you don't buy it, okay? Typically, it's kind of like, okay, that's cool. You didn't get what you wanted. When you substitute my Ford F-150 for DJing a wedding and it's a once in a lifetime event, there's a possibility that you're dealing with, oh my gosh, I've got 6 weeks or 6 months of, I've been crying into my pillow. I've had to go to therapy, these type of things. So with a limitation of liability clause is that if I breach the contract in some way, okay, because my contract says I'm going to DJ for 6 hours, provide lighting, whatever it is, to the extent that I have breached this contract and caused you damages in some way, we are going to limit those damages to X. Usually X is going to be the amount that you pay in the contract, or X could be something else. It's 3 times the contract value, whatever you want it to be. But you're telling the client, this is an arm's length transaction. And even though this is a once in a lifetime event for you, I'm a human being. My business is run with a certain level of risk. And the certain level of risk that I can't deal with is the potential of $1 million lawsuit because my lights didn't work and the first dance with your dad kind of sucked, right? So a limitation of liability clause is telling the client, this is what you're going to get if I do in fact mess up. You can prove that it's going to be limited by X amount of money. So I think those are 2 big ones. For DJs specifically, I think that laying out the concept of kind of the performance aspect of the contract is important. And what I mean by that is saying, look, if you guys are a bunch of sticks in the mud, like, what do you want me to be? Like, I mean, like Snoop Dogg couldn't come in here and get this thing cranked up, right? So like there's a certain level of performance that goes into this, but if people aren't digging it, they're not digging it. Like, I'll do the best I can, but so the artistic discretion, it's on me. You know what I mean? Like I can't force people to dance, stuff like that. So to the extent that you think that that's a breach of contract, you're wrong. So that's kind of something DJ specific that I think is often overlooked. Aside from like, I need certain amount of electrical requirements, I need to be able to get to the setup, that kind of stuff.
So to your point, one of the things I ended up putting in my contract, because oftentimes we work, and it's a great relationship when working with like a wedding planner, but occasionally a planner or even another vendor for that matter, or it could be like a wedding party member or something like that. They decide that instead of this schedule or this plan that you've already discussed with the couple, they've decided, well, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to do this. And I had a circumstance where one of the gentlemen that works for me had kind of that situation happen to him. And then the customer came to me and said, well, we're not happy about what happened because we explicitly discussed with the DJ how we wanted things to go, and they didn't go that way. And they didn't go that way because somebody that he was working with decided to alter and change the plan, so to speak. So all that being said, I basically had a clause added to my contract, paraphrasing, of course, that says if any third party or anybody else other than those who sign this contract take any responsibility in the production, the timing, the everything that happens at the event, then client will not be able to hold us responsible for the outcome of what happens. And again, I'm paraphrasing. It's probably terrible paraphrasing.
But that's incredibly smart. That's a good idea. So, and I would also include the guests themselves. Like when the guests are late by an hour and it pushes the first dance back or the cutting of the cake back, all these type of things, that's not your fault. They can't come after you for that. So yeah, it's an exculpatory clause, for lack of a better word. You're saying, look, to the extent somebody else backs these things up, I mean, that's on y'all. My name is Paul. So, but actually that's a great example for the limitation of liability. So it's another example. So just really quickly. So like, let's say that it is your fault that everything is late by an hour, and the planner has to stay for another hour. That's $1,000. you know, the I don't know, like the photographer says all these things up and it all adds up and it's like 20 grand, but your contract was only $1,000, right? So that limitation of liability is going to help you even in a context of not an exaggerated, you know, $1 million thing. So, because those things actually do happen. But anyway, that just reminded me of that example. So anyway, but yes.
Any other off the top of your head you can think of that often get overlooked? I think those, yeah, I would agree with you. Those are probably the two big ones.
Yeah, I think those are two big ones that I can think of.
Nick, Frank, have you guys run into anything where you said, you know, hey, you know, it'd probably be a good idea to have a clause for this?
Right off the top of my head,
You put them on the spot, man. Like, no, that's not right.
Yeah, come on now.
Oh man.
No, maybe
Well,
not.
during COVID, that was the biggest one for me was during COVID with the, but other than that, not anything where I was like, oh man, that should be in there.
Let me help you. I hadn't had to put this into a contract until about, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 months ago. But a DJ was having so much trouble with people dropping the mic that he put it in the contract that I can give you a dummy mic. I can get, so you can drop it if you want to. It's a droppable mic. It has zero value, but if you drop my mic, it's $1,000.
Wow. Rightfully so.
Yeah, that brings up I actually had a dad of a bride who, because I think, and I'd have to go back and look, but I think one of the clauses in our contracts was referring to the fact that not only do they have to hold themselves responsible for not, you know, trashing the DJ equipment or knocking speakers over or breaking anything, but also be responsible for how their guests act and so on and so forth. And he was saying that he didn't want to, he didn't feel it was his responsibility to take on the actions of the guests that they invited to the event. So I was curious by that. And I was like, well, I guess if I'm in his position, I could see that happening. But as the provider, how do you look at protecting yourself from that situation?
Every contract that I draft for my wedding professionals, it's essentially a client behavior clause. It's perfectly legal and acceptable and enforceable to make the host of the party responsible for the actions of the attendees of that party. So, okay. To be quite honest, though, in the context of generally when the wedding professional is a man, it's not as big of a deal. But when it's a female, you're dealing with people trying to grab your boobs, your butt, like being sexually aggressive, getting drunk and stuff like that. So that was like when I first started drafting these, that was what it is. But then I realized, hey, people try to start fights with guys. They're trying to, you know, mess up your stuff. So essentially it's like this, like client is responsible for the behavior of the guest. But the issue is you want to be able to give the client the obligation, or the opportunity, I should say, to mitigate or lessen the damage. So what happens is that, hey, listen, whoever that guy is, you went to high school with him. He's put his drink down on my keyboard. I told him to stop doing it. It's cool now. It looks like he's about to do it again. If he does it again, we're going to have a problem. And so that gives that person, you go talk to him. So it gives that person a chance to mitigate. Like he goes over, talks to the high school guy, don't do that anymore. And if he does it again, then you have results. And you essentially, you escalate the action to all the way to, in my contract, depending on, you know, if you've given them a chance, they've refused or they don't want to, then you take your ball and go home without any repercussions in terms of a lawsuit. Yeah. So yeah, absolutely.
I think one of the biggest, we're getting close on time here. Nick, I know you have one other thing too. I sometimes I feel weird about the whole, well, my contract says, is there like any best practices to, because in one breath you're like, well, you know, you say, okay, well, it's the responsibility of the client to read your contract, but is there any kind of suggestion or conversation maybe that could be had either beforehand to address things that could happen in kind of a cool way, but not like saying, hey, this might happen at your event, Does that make sense? Like, I don't like to be that guy that's like, well, my contract says so. So just small example, outdoor events, I have in my contract, if I'm going to be set up outdoors, that I need to have something covering the equipment, a tent, something covering, protecting the equipment from the elements. Don't necessarily care about myself, but I do care about my equipment. And 8 out of 10 times that doesn't happen because the tent doesn't look pretty. It takes away from the beauty of everything else going on, and so on and so forth. And it always puts me in that my contract says situation. And I've told him ahead of time, and I've asked him ahead of time. So I'm just curious if there's any thoughts that maybe I'm just overlooking that could be done to kind of maybe prevent having to go down that path of my contract says in the heat of the moment.
Great question. So it seems to me that the best course of action is to, when you are, I guess, initially sitting down with the client, or whatever the time is in which you're going over what you're going to do, is if it's a cost benefit. So to handle 3 or 4 of the things that seem to come up the most, if that's one of the things that comes up the most for you, talk to them about it. Hey, listen, typically, if this is going to be an outdoor event, I need a tent. And typically that's an issue for some clients because it's not pretty. So I'm just letting you know that I have to have that, because if it rains, if somebody spits on it, if a bird poops on it, it's going to ruin some stuff. So it's a non-negotiable. You got to have it. If I don't have it, I can't set up. Is that going to be a problem? No, it's not gonna be a problem. Okay. So at least you've educated them up front to the 2 or 3 or 4 things that seem to come up the most often. And then as you get, if you're at the event and there's no tent, you go, hey, remember that when we talked and I said, this is a non-negotiable thing, and I told you why, like, is there anything else we can do? Do we not have a tent nearby or something like that? And they go, no, F you, it's ugly. I was never going to do it, even though you told me that. Depending on how your contract is worded, and that it's going to allow you to leave. But look, you have to do the cost benefit, right? Like, you will be and that's what the contract is for. In a lot of instances, you have the right to do something, but are you going to do it? Right. But at least your contract gives you the right to it. If you're paid up and whatever, you can leave. Right. But I can't tell you like a wording at the event that's other than, hey, look, we talked about this and it's in my contract. I got to have an umbrella. I don't know. That's another Alan Berg thing probably, but from a legal standpoint, you can do it.
Yeah. Okay. Appreciate that. Yeah.
So when we talk about, kind of circling back to, lawsuits and protecting yourself, but when we were establishing our company, I think a lot of people, including myself when I was first getting started, didn't really know where to turn in terms of, limited liability, corp, S-Corp, or a sole proprietorship. There's tons of, options out there when you're starting. You're like, I don't know what to do. Maybe we could explain for the audience that maybe the difference between them, because I know even to myself, S-Corp, I still get confused on some of the stuff, what the difference is, and then, what would be best for, wedding professionals.
The basic concept is that if you go out, like, phone rings, I'm going to plan your wedding. I've never done that before. I'm just going to go out and do that. Or I'm going to DJ your wedding. I'm going to photograph your wedding. You get out and do that. Then you are most likely a sole proprietor. That means that there is no legal difference between the person and the business. The owner is the same as the business. And what that means is that if the photographer that goes out and does that, the DJ goes out and does that, if they create some type of liability where they drop something on somebody's foot and hurt them, they breach a contract or whatever, the liability of the business is the liability of the person. So you can come after not just the assets of the business, but you can come after the assets of the person. So a long time ago, we're like, man, that's not good. That doesn't incentivize people to go out and start businesses. If somebody can get sued and their 1996 Hyundai, it gets taken and towed away, or their Beanie Babies get taken away in a lawsuit. So we had to figure out a way to separate the liabilities of the business with the assets of the owners. And so we came up with the idea, not we, I think the Dutch came up with the idea of the corporation, which is the owners of the business just sit there and make money, and the liabilities of the business are the liabilities of the business, and the two shall not meet. However, with corporations, there's a lot of formalities with it. You got to have meetings. You got to have, Christian Bale shows up at the board of directors meeting, and like there's a hostile takeover. A lot of formalities with corporations to be able to say, I own this, but I don't have to worry about the liabilities of it. So maybe 35 years ago, we came up with the concept of the limited liability company, which is taking all the good things about just being able to go out and make money without any formalities with the protections that a corporation gives you. So that's why it's kind of like, what was that? Move over bacon. Here's something leaner. So so that's what the LLC is. It limits the liability of the company to the assets of the company and separates them. So you've got corporations, C Corps, you've got LLCs, and you got sole proprietors. So the difference in those is the level of liability for the owners. Now, they are all taxed differently. So talking about taxation, the sole proprietor, you're taxing them basically on the income that they make. With an LLC, typically you are being taxed as I believe as an employee, if I'm not mistaken. And then corporations is a double tax. It's corporation is taxed, and then the owner is taxed on the dividends or whatever. So then they're like, well, that's no good. We don't want to double tax an LLC or whatever. So they came up with the idea of the S-Corp. An S-Corp is not a formation. It's a taxation category. So it's an option that an LLC has in terms of taxation. An LLC can either be taxed as basically a sole proprietor or partnership, depending on if you got more than one owner, or as an S-Corp. And I'm probably not the most qualified to go into why you would want me taxed in a certain way. I don't ever pay my taxes. I'm just kidding. But that's a matter for another day.
Hold on.
Okay.
There we go.
But anyway, but in terms of what I see the most of is limited liability companies, for that simple reason that it's the easiest and almost always the cheapest.
Yeah, that's great information. I mean, that was pretty much the light at the end of the tunnel for me was, LLC seems to be that. And I know a lot of other people can relate to that for sure.
Did we clip that 10 seconds so we can hang it over Rob's head and get him to do some free work for us?
That I don't get my taxes part. Yeah, that's why we always record these. We don't tell people why, but that's why. No, just kidding. No, this has been great, man. I mean, I could talk about, again, like I said in the beginning of the show, I could talk about this stuff forever, because it's just, to me, when you think about creating a business and you put your blood, sweat, and tears into it, it's like, I always say, it's like having a child, and you want to protect it like a child, and you want to nurture it and grow it like a child. And if you're going to put that much effort and energy into it, then you need to be knowledgeable of how to protect it. And that's not something that any of us are really just born with that knowledge. It's great to have, relationships and connections with people such as yourself who do have that information and have spent the time to study and understand that information. So we appreciate you sharing just, a little bit of that with our community.
Thank you for having me. It's been a good time.
Now, if anybody wanted to reach out to you beyond the show and maybe just have some one-on-one, what's the best way for people to reach you?
I think that if you email rob@weddingindustrylaw.com, but I don't think anybody emails anymore. So you can just DM me on Instagram, which is, I am at Wedding Lawyer on Instagram. I'm on there most of the time. We talked about that earlier. We mentioned that earlier. And if you guys are not following Rob, you definitely should, because the little quick videos that you do, I love those. Are just little anecdotes, just little pieces of information that are great to have. And you're like, you know what? I don't know when I'm going to need that, but when I do need it, I'm going to remember Rob told me about it. So I appreciate that. Doing those. I appreciate that, because I joke now that I have the least popular YouTube channel dedicated to wedding industry law on the entire internet. So
I don't think so, man. You have my vote of confidence all the time.
It's you and my mom watching those videos then.
There we go. Well, hopefully after tonight, we'll get a few more people doing it, right?
Look,
Very good.
can I just ask one real quick follow-up question? Does it matter where people live, like for you, or are you kind of able to help people regardless of like state, and how does that work? Just real quick.
That's a great question. So I can only do contracts. I can only represent people in court in states that I'm licensed. I'm licensed in California, New York, Florida, Georgia, and Tennessee. I do offer contracts that anybody around the country can purchase, and it's an excellent starting point for you. That's at wedforms.com, WEDFORMZ.com.
Well, see, there you go. Chris Disk is going to be also another follower and frequent watcher of the videos on YouTube and on Instagram.
Great. Thank you, DJ Chris Disk.
Well, I think we are. Oh, cool. And he said he's in New York, so that's perfect. There you go.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you again, Rob, for joining us. Frank, Nick, anything else before we wrap up and close down the live part of this show?
I'm going to pay for Rob to get his license in Virginia.
Look at there.
Just thank you, Rob, again. Amazing information. I think this stuff's really important, and it's overlooked sometimes because, again, a lot of the people in the wedding industry, like myself included, are, we just love what we do. We love making videos. We love DJing, and I think sometimes we forget to kind of look at the, the nitty gritty and like the real, stuff that keeps the business going, the backbone of the business. So it's really great to have that refresher, and I really appreciate you being on.
Thank you.
Yeah, likewise. I couldn't have said it any better than that, Nick.
Absolutely. Hey, if you're going to work hard and you're going to have fun with your business, you might as well take good care of it so you can do it for a lot of years, right?
Yeah, amen.
All right, everybody. Well, Rob, if you'll hang out for just a second, we're going to go off live here, and we'll say goodbye on the other side of that. But everybody else, thank you very much for being a part of another one of our shows. We appreciate you watching live with us, or if you listen to the replay. Again, please feel free anytime to drop comments in the replays, either the video replay on YouTube or the podcast that you can hear on any of your podcast subscription places that you might listen to them on. We do monitor the comments, so if anything comes in after the fact, if we can't answer them ourselves, we will get with our guest and make sure to get those answers for you. So with that being said, thank you very much. We'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Wedding Business Growth. Have a great day.